Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome Liquid Intelligent Technologies to this year's My Broadband Cloud Conference. Joining us all the way from London is David Behr, who is the Group Chief Digital Officer at Liquid Intelligent Technologies. David, welcome to you and thanks for being on board as an event partner. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. We're very excited to be here at your event. And it's great to have this opportunity to come to you from London.
That's fantastic. Well, I hope you're having good weather. We are having beautiful weather. I just love to rub this in to anybody around the world that we have the most beautiful weather in South Africa. But we had to talk about the cloud, and Liquid is doing some incredible stuff, supporting your remote workforce with Liquid Intelligent Technologies. It's been amazing the last 18 months how these workforces are all working remotely, how to enable telephony in Microsoft Teams. You know, I was just discussing this earlier before we started. How do you go about doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, great. So, as this pandemic has progressed, we found a lot more people working from home. As a result, they need to have the same tools and capabilities that they would have when they are at the office. So one of the key things they need to take with them is their phone. They need to take their phone number, very often their landline number that they used to making business calls on and receiving business calls on. So what we've done is we've worked with Microsoft through various programs to do something called One Voice for Teams Direct Routing. That allows us to take our phone infrastructure, our core phone telephony infrastructure, and directly bring it into the Teams environment. So people can now take their business numbers that they would normally have had as an extension on their desk, or maybe use a separate soft phone application, and now bring that into Teams, which allows them to make normal telephony calls globally, domestically, as if they are using a normal extension. And the beauty about that, of course, is that you now have a single application that you use, and that single application brings all of your collaboration. You can work on documents together, you can set up your meetings together, you can have video conference calls together, and now you can also have your telephony calling.
That is really, really very powerful. So you've got everybody working wherever they are, but it's like everybody's at the office, if that makes any sense. You could be reached wherever you like. You could be on the beach for that matter. It will all route via your Teams connection and the way you've configured it. I mean, that is pretty unique. So why choose unified communications as a solution, and how can it improve businesses? And I guess the agility, which we just discussed, is obviously one of the key points, isn't it, David?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, you could be at the beach, and with virtual backgrounds, as many of us now use, you actually could be at the beach.
Just don't tell your boss.
I wish I was today, but I'm not.
Don't tell your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think it's one of the key things it does as well is it allows the businesses to have better cost accountability, because now the control of those calls and the cost of those calls falls under the business expenses. And IT departments have visibility into what's happening on those calls. They can see which calls are obviously being made. They can do large agreements with operators like us to bring down the cost of those minutes. And you're no longer having to use 2 or 3 devices or applications to do all of that calling. So it restores some visibility, and also is very good for cost budget management as well.
Yeah, actually, as you're talking about the cost management, I mean, the moment you're routing it like that, I mean, the cost savings must be enormous. I'm sure it's quite easy to quantify the savings from calls. I mean, if you've got an organization where you've got like 2,000-3,000 landlines, that can go into a lot of money. When you look at the international coverage, for example, which you touched on, which regions does Liquid cover?
So we cover, at the moment, 6 countries where we are a licensed operator with full PSTN interconnections. That is South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia in the south. And then on the east, we have Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. We also, of course, have international calling for all of our customers do.
So, for example, if I have a colleague who's sitting in Zimbabwe and I make a call to them, it's just routing via Teams and there's no international call charges, right?
Well, a little bit more nuanced than that, because it kind of depends on how you're calling them. So if you're calling a Teams, Microsoft Teams to Microsoft Teams call, then you're absolutely right. It's not a voice call at all. It's completely free.
Yes.
One of the nice things about Teams is that you can call Teams users in other organizations. So you're not just calling people in your own org, You can do it across organizations. You can have chats across organizations. You can share documents across organizations as well. Whenever you're doing some kind of call or collaboration or video conference purely in the Teams environment, you've got no additional telephony costs whatsoever, except obviously the underlying bandwidth of it. As soon as you want to make a phone call to the public phone system, then you are making a regular phone call.
Okay.
Now, what Liquid is launching here as part of our One Voice for Teams direct routing is that we have flat rate calling for domestic plans. So you can now have great budget management as well. You know what your monthly fee is going to be per user per extension. That gives you unlimited domestic calling for standard non-premium rate lines. And then for anything that's outside of your country, you are getting some very competitive rates from Liquid for international calling.
That is incredibly powerful. So how does Lit provide that support for modern calling?
So what we've done is we have a great partner vendor, Metaswitch, who has actually been recently acquired by Microsoft, and they provide SBCs. So we have our own call switching core in each of the 6 countries I mentioned. So it's completely regulatory compliant. We have SBCs and media flows in those countries. We then interconnect our SBCs into the Microsoft Teams environment, and therefore we can terminate those phone calls, whether they're coming in or coming out, into Microsoft Teams. And then a customer, an admin of a customer, would configure these numbers that we allocate inside their own Microsoft tenant.
Wow.
So you then get a bunch of numbers and you allocate those numbers effectively to users. And then they effectively get a phone number and they get a Teams dialing pad, calling pad in their Teams application, and they can make and receive phone calls. And one of the beauties about it as well is that once you've got all this working in the cloud, the next steps that you can take are enormous. So for example, you can start doing cloud-based call recording. You can do analysis on the calls that you've recorded and stored in the cloud. So you can apply your AI machine learning to that. So ideal for people in call centers, for example, to get the sentiment of people that are calling into your call center, how they're feeling. Are they feeling negative? How do they feel at the end of the call? So a lot of data analytics that can be done because you're doing stuff in the cloud. Equally, cost management. We can do costings per extension to see, or per department to see what they're costing you. We can do call routing in the cloud as well. I think as soon as you've taken your sort of traditional telephony minutes and moved them into the cloud, you suddenly have an ability really unlock a bunch of capabilities that you wouldn't have previously had to be far more modern in how you do your approach your telephony.
It's actually amazing. We look at the technology here, David. I mean, that sentiment, to be able to pick that up and, have artificial intelligence and algorithms analyzing that in real time, and you're picking up that information, that is incredibly valuable for any business. So I want to come back just a second to the costings, because whenever you talk about costings in today's challenging environment, when you talk about cost savings, you automatically get people's attention. How does adding that voice to Microsoft Teams work from a cost perspective, and who actually handles the billing?
Very good questions, Aki. Thank you. So the billing relationship is with us as Liquid Telecom. So actually, the Teams direct routing is fundamentally made up of 3 different components, right? The first one is your Microsoft licensing. So you need to have your Microsoft 365 seat, which you would currently have as part of Business Premium. Maybe it's an E1, it's an E3. And then on top of that, you need to have the Microsoft phone system licensing. Now, the phone system for Microsoft is a fully featured PBX. And I don't think people quite realize just how capable the Teams ecosystem is in terms of running a complete set of PBX functionalities in the cloud. So that phone system license is your second component. And then your third component on top of that is the calling plans. And that's where Liquid comes in. We provide those calling plans, as I said to you, unlimited local domestic for a flat rate, and then international per minute rating. And so you bring that call plan in, you will then be able to make all of that calling. Now, who handles the billing? You buy your seats from whoever you normally would buy your Microsoft seats from. Liquid is a very good example of someone who's a key partner in the CSP program. So we can sell you all of the licenses that you need for this particular service. But you can, of course, buy that from other partners. And sometimes large organizations will buy their seats directly from Microsoft under an enterprise agreement. Once you've got the licensing from us or from somebody else, you can then bring on top the Liquid calling plans. And that is a part that obviously Liquid directly bills, because we are the operator of those calls.
So, David, what kind of size businesses can use this one voice?
It really, it's open to all size of businesses. I wouldn't say that the value prop is strongly weighted towards one end or the other end. On the smaller end, the advantages you have is you have a one-stop shop, right? You have one ecosystem where you're doing your mail, you're doing your collaboration, you're doing your sharing of files and documents, and now you've got voice as well. On the larger enterprise side, they are benefiting from the fact that they've already got big scale in terms of buying power from companies like Microsoft. And they can then enable, very often they're already buying the E5 seat, which is the biggest seat SKU from the premium seat SKU from Microsoft. And E5 already comes with phone system. So for no additional money, the large enterprises can now enable voice calling with Teams direct routing with Liquid Telecom. So it's not costing them any more money, other than, of course, the calling plan itself. So again, the full spectrum. And I think a lot of enterprises today are kind of deciding what their ecosystem looks like. Are you going to have multiple islands of infrastructure? So you might have a unified communications extension or phone system. You might have an on-prem or even cloud PBX. You might have Microsoft 365 for your collaboration, Teams, mail. Or do you want to bring it under one unified platform? The advantage of that is you've got improved security because you only got one set of credentials and one set of systems to look at and watch. You have better cost management, and you have a lot more agility and flexibility in how you then run your remote workforce because they're all living in one ecosystem and makes it a lot easier to share those files and documents and do calling.
That's brilliant. I mean, David, I'm thinking that when people do go back to work and you go back into a traditional environment, we're still a long way away from that, and we're often hearing of the hybrid office. What happens to the solution? Do you just continue using it, or do you transfer the way you were doing things before, for example?
I like the way you put it when you go back to work. I've never stopped working.
Yeah,
And I
well,
suspect most people have never stopped working when they go back to the office. And I think
yes,
that's a key important thing to understand is that I think work has changed forever. I think people are going to be far more flexible about where they do the work, right? Work is something you do, not a place you go. And I think that now it won't matter. When you go back to your offices, you will take exactly the same infrastructure that you have with you because you've already got it working at home. You can have it working in a coffee shop. You could have it, as your example, working on the beach. And so when you go back to the physical office environment, that still comes with you. And I think there will be that hybrid. And I think people have to spend some time figuring out how that hybrid will work. Because what I've found from my own experience is 100% virtual meeting can be very successful.
yes,
100% in-person meeting can also be successful. When you've got a mix between the two, I think you start to get some disparities between those that are together in one room and those that are remote. So what I think you're going to find happening is an improved video conferencing environment, right? We're going to have to get much more capable on, for example, HD video conferencing. We might even get to the point where you've got some kind of HoloLens devices where you actually, it doesn't matter if you're in the room or you're not in the room, you feel like you're inside the room. So I think we're going to have to get those hybrid meetings to be far more, they're just a meeting, not hybrid. And I think when you start to see people in two different environments, it can be quite hard to run one single meeting. So I think that'll start to evolve. So I think when people start to be more mixed in the hybrid approach, it will start to, there'll be more investment
yeah.
inside that conferencing. And
I,
one point that a lot of people have said to me is, hang on, voice is something that's kind of declining, isn't it? Isn't it something that we're going to be seeing less of? There's margin erosion, etc. And my argument is very simple. Communications is going up. I think we talk and communicate with people more than ever before. Now that will change. As I said, it will change. It won't be so much of you picking up an extension and dialing an old narrowband codec where you can hardly hear the person. It's a bit tinny. You will end up doing a lot more voice communication, but of a much higher quality. And the cloud is enabling that. So I think the number of minutes we spend communicating will only increase. And I think the type of those minutes, the quality of those minutes will only increase. And that gives a very big opportunity to companies like ourselves, because we can enable those. We can enable those in the cloud, and we can drive a premium service that really makes meetings more effective at the end of the day. Because it's not just about the cost of those calls or the cost of those meetings, it's the effectiveness of the meeting. It's, by the way, the most expensive cost you have in a meeting is not your phone system. It's the time and salaries of all those people sitting in that meeting. So if they can be more effective, they can be shorter, if they can be easier to hear each other, understand each other, including all the different cues you have when you can physically be with somebody and see somebody, their movements, how they act, etc. That is just going to, I think, drive a whole new set of services and products.
Yeah, makes complete sense, and it's exciting the way you've put it. And I guess it's all about the experience, right? And I was reading, you mentioned holograms just a second ago, that you're actually trialing that technology in the UK, where people are going to be, by the end of this decade, I think even sooner than that, have a conversation with somebody that appears as a hologram. And again, it eliminates so many other things of that impersonality of this remote working environment. So, David, how does one get more information? How does one get in touch with Liquid to enable this technology that you're talking about?
That's a really good question. I think start off on our webpage, and I think we'll share some more information with you on the links that you can go to for that. That would be your starting point. Reach out to your account manager at Liquid as well if you have one, and we would be more than happy to help you on the journey.
Okay, and just this is a question that's just come in from somebody. I mean, aside from your actual hardware that you're using and your computer, do you need to buy any additional hardware? What hardware do you need for this to work? I imagine a computer will suffice because it's all happening in the cloud, right?
Correct. So actually, just to also answer your last question, I just realized we have a unique address now, which is teams@liquid.tech. So teams@liquid.tech. It's drop an email to that. You'll find me or one of my team ready to answer and help you with that. Yeah, in terms of hardware, also a very good question. We are moving everything into the cloud. We don't want enterprises to have to buy hardware. I think that's just a barrier to entry. You then have to make sure it's safe, it's secure. You need to make sure you've got power for it, something that can be quite difficult in a number of countries that we operate in. And so all of this is cloud-based. So as long as you've got a mobile phone that's working and connected to the internet, or you've got a laptop that's connected to the internet, you're good to go. And we will make sure that those phone calls follow you and can be made successfully.
Security is a big issue, David. How secure is this?
Yeah, Microsoft as an organization spends billions in investing in security. Liquid Intelligent Technologies, I'm still getting used to our new branding, has got a cybersecurity unit that I'm in fact building up at the moment, who take security very seriously. We do a number of measures to obviously make sure that our own infrastructure is protected, but equally do a lot for our customers. For example, multi-factor authentication, making sure that you're not just using simple passwords, making sure that you are on a secure network when you are accessing your corporate identity and information. So it is a very key part of it. And I think one of the benefits of Teams Direct Routing is that you get all of the power of Microsoft's identity, Azure Active Directory identity capability in Teams, which means that you don't have the common problem you have with existing unified communications today, where a SIP trunk or a SIP extension is very often protected only by a simple username and password. So there's a lot of fraud, a lot of abuse can happen if someone hacks into your extensions. With Teams Direct Routing, that becomes a lot harder because you have all the capabilities you have today of logging into Microsoft. You can't make a phone call or receive a phone call until you've authenticated with Teams with multi-factor authentication as you would any Microsoft service. So actually, Teams Direct Routing is probably the most secure way today of doing telephony.
Absolutely fascinating how everything has changed around us, and great solutions such as the one I've been talking to you about. David Behr, who is the Group Digital Officer at Liquid Intelligent Technologies. David, thank you so much for joining us at this year's My Broadband Cloud Conference. We wish you well, and we hope to see you in person in South Africa. Enjoy London.
I really can't wait. And you're right about the weather. I think the weather is fantastic there. And this time of the year, I noticed that we're heading towards the winter. I'm getting a bit cold and you're heading towards your summer. So I really hope that I can travel out there very soon and see you. Thank you very much.
All the best, David. Thank you for your time.